The fire roared like a beast unchained, licking the walls of the house I'd saved 3 times. I stood in the backyard, the heat prickling my skin, watching the flames devour the life I'd fought for. My brother's voice, shrill and desperate, cut through the crackle. "Ellie, what have you done?" I didn't answer. The smoke curled upward, a dark confession against the clear September sky. For years, I'd poured my soul into this house. Our family's anchor, the one thing Mom and Dad swore they'd never let go. 3 times, I'd pulled it back from the brink. The foreclosure in '08, the flood in '15, and the tax lien just last year. Each time, I scraped together every penny, begged banks, worked double shifts at the diner, and sold my own dreams to keep this place standing. And each time, my brother, Nate, did nothing but watch, his hands clean, his conscience cleaner. The house wasn't just wood and brick. It was Mom's garden, where she taught me to plant marigolds. It was Dad's workshop, where he'd tinker with old radios, humming Johnny Cash. It was the kitchen table where we'd laugh over burnt pancakes. But it was also the place where betrayal festered, where my parents' promises turned to ash long before the fire I'd set today. It started 5 years ago, when Dad's heart attack left him frail and Mom's memory began to slip. Nate, older by 5 years, swooped in, suddenly the dutiful son. He'd visit on weekends, bringing takeout and charm, while I was the one changing Mom's sheets, paying the bills, and fighting off creditors. "Ellie, you're so good at this," Mom would say, her eyes soft but distant. "Nate's got his own life, you know. His own life, a wife, 2 kids, a cushy tech job in Seattle." Meanwhile, I was 35, single, and tethered to this house like a ghost. Last month, the final blow landed. Dad called me to the living room, his hands trembling as he held a manila envelope. "Ellie, we've made a decision," he said. Mom nodded, her gaze fixed on the floor. "We're leaving the house to Nate. It's only fair. He's got a family to provide for." My heart stopped. "Fair?" I whispered. I'd saved this house 3 times. I'd given up grad school, a career, a life. Nate hadn't lifted a finger. "He's the eldest," Dad said, as if that explained everything. I stumbled out, my chest tight, and drove to the cliffs overlooking the Pacific. The ocean roared below, mirroring the rage inside me. I'd given everything, and they'd chosen Nate, again. That night, I lay awake, the weight of their decision crushing me. But something else sparked, too. A reckless, dangerous idea. If they wanted Nate to have the house, fine. But I'd make sure there was nothing left to inherit. The next morning, I started planning. I didn't want anyone hurt, just the house gone. I waited for a day when Mom and Dad were at their weekly doctor's appointment, and Nate was in Seattle. I siphoned gas from the old lawnmower, poured it in the basement, and struck a match. The flames caught fast, greedy for the dry wood. I stood back, watching the house I'd saved become a pyre. Now, as the fire trucks wailed in the distance, Nate's car screeched into the driveway. He ran toward me, his face a mask of disbelief. "Ellie, why?" he shouted. I met his eyes, my voice steady. "You got what you wanted, Nate. The house is yours." He froze, the truth dawning. The house was his, nothing but ash now. I turned away, the heat at my back, and walked toward the street. Neighbors gathered, whispering, their faces a blur. I didn't care. For the first time in years, I felt free. The house was gone, and with it, the weight of my family's betrayal. But as the sirens grew louder, a small voice inside me whispered, "What have you done, Ellie?" The fire trucks arrived too late. By the time the hoses sprayed, the house was a skeleton, its bones blackened and crumbling. I stood across the street, my arms crossed, watching the firefighters shout orders over the roar of water and flame. Nate was still there, pacing, his phone pressed to his ear. "No, it's gone, Sarah," he said to his wife, his voice breaking. "Everything's gone." I wanted to feel triumph, but all I felt was a hollow ache. Mom and Dad pulled up in their old Subaru, their faces pale as they stepped out. Mom clutched Dad's arm, her eyes wide with horror. "Ellie," she cried, rushing toward me. "What happened? Are you okay?" Her concern stung worse than the smoke in my lungs. I nodded, unable to speak. Dad just stared at the ruins, his mouth open, as if the house's collapse had taken part of him with it. The police arrived next, their lights flashing blue and red. A stocky officer named Martinez approached me, notebook in hand. "Ma'am, we need to ask you some questions," he said, his tone gentle but firm. I nodded again, my throat tight. I'd known this moment would come, but I hadn't planned what to say. The truth? A lie? My mind raced as I followed him to the squad car. "Ellie, tell me you didn't do this," Nate said, intercepting us. His eyes searched mine, desperate for denial. I looked away, the weight of his gaze too much. "I did what I had to," I said softly. His face crumpled, and for a moment, I saw the brother I'd once idolized, the one who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd snuck me cookies when Mom wasn't looking. But that brother was gone, replaced by someone who'd let me carry the family's burdens alone. Martinez took my statement, his pen scratching as I recounted the morning. I'd been in the backyard, smelled smoke, saw flames. A half-truth, but enough to keep me out of cuffs for now. He nodded, his eyes narrowing slightly. "We'll need to investigate further," he said. "Arson's a serious charge." The word hung in the air, heavy as the smoke still rising from the wreckage. That night, I stayed at a cheap motel on the edge of town. The room smelled of stale cigarettes, but it was better than facing Mom and Dad's questions or Nate's accusations. I lay on the lumpy mattress, staring at the ceiling, replaying the fire in my mind. I'd wanted to hurt them, Nate, Mom, Dad, for choosing him over me. But now, with the house gone, I felt no victory, just loss. The next day, I met Mom and Dad at a coffee shop. They looked smaller, diminished, their eyes red from crying. "Ellie, why didn't you tell us how you felt?" Mom asked, her voice trembling. "We thought you were okay with it." I laughed, a bitter sound. "Okay with giving up everything for a house you handed to Nate?" "No, Mom, I wasn't okay." Dad reached for my hand, but I pulled back. "We didn't know," he said. "We thought Nate needed it more." "Needed it?" I snapped. "He's got a house, a family, a life. I gave up mine for you." The words spilled out, raw and jagged. Mom covered her mouth, tears spilling over. Dad's shoulders sagged. For the first time, I saw their guilt, their regret. But it didn't erase the years of being invisible. I left the coffee shop, my heart pounding. Outside, the air was crisp, the first hint of fall. I walked aimlessly, the town blurring around me. The house was gone, but the pain wasn't. I'd burned it down to reclaim something, my pride, my freedom. But what had I really gained? The question gnawed at me as I wandered, the weight of my choice settling in. A week later, the investigation tightened around me. Martinez called, asking me to come to the station. "Just a few more questions," he said, but his tone was colder now. I sat in a sterile room, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and answered as vaguely as I could. "I don't know how the fire started." I lied, my hands clasped tight to hide their trembling. "I was outside when it happened." Martinez leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "Gasoline was found in the basement, Ellie. Care to explain that?" My stomach dropped. I'd been careful, but not careful enough. "The lawnmower," I said, grasping at straws. "It's old, leaks sometimes." He scribbled something, unconvinced, and let me go with a warning to stay in town. As I stepped outside, the weight of suspicion pressed down on me. I wasn't just fighting my family now, I was fighting the law. Nate called that evening, his voice tight with anger. "They're saying it's arson, Ellie. You know anything about that?" I didn't answer, letting the silence stretch. "You're my sister," he said, softer now. "If you did this, tell me why." I hung up, my chest aching. I wanted to scream that he'd taken everything, Mom and Dad's love, their trust, the house. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, I drove to the ruins. The house was a blackened scar, the chimney the only thing still standing. I walked through the debris, the smell of charred wood thick in the air. I found Mom's old gardening gloves, half-burned, and clutched them to my chest. Memories flooded back, her laughter, her hands in the dirt, teaching me to nurture life. I destroyed that, too. At the diner the next day, my coworker Jess pulled me aside. "People are talking, Ellie," she whispered. "They say you burned the house down because of Nate." I forced a smile, brushing it off, but the gossip was spreading like the fire I'd set. The town I'd grown up in, where everyone knew my name, was turning against me. I felt exposed, raw, like a nerve laid bare. That night, I dreamed of the house before the fire. Mom was in the kitchen, humming. Dad was in his workshop, tinkering. Nate and I were kids again, playing tag in the backyard. I woke up crying, the loss sharper than ever. I'd burned more than a house. I'd burned my past, my family, my place in the world. But there was no going back. I met with a lawyer the next morning, a grizzled man named Tom who'd known Dad for years. "Ellie, this doesn't look good," he said, flipping through the police report. "They've got evidence of accelerants, and your story's thin. If you're hiding something, tell me now." I swallowed hard, the truth clawing at my throat. But I shook my head. "I didn't do anything," I said, the lie tasting bitter. Tom sighed, rubbing his temples. "If they charge you, it's serious. Arson, maybe even prison time." The word prison hit like a punch. I'd acted out of rage, but I hadn't thought this far. The house was gone, my family fractured, and now my freedom hung in the balance. I left Tom's office, the world tilting under my feet. As I walked home, I passed the coffee shop where I'd met Mom and Dad. Through the window, I saw them inside, heads bent together, looking older than ever. My heart twisted. I'd wanted to punish them, to make them see me, but all I'd done was break them. And myself. The fire had consumed more than I'd intended, and now I had to face the ashes of my choices. The town felt smaller now, suffocating. Every glance from a neighbor, every whispered conversation at the diner, felt like a judgment. I'd become the story, the woman who burned her family's house down. No one knew for sure, but the rumors were enough. I stopped going to work, unable to face Jess's pity or the customer's stares. My world shrank to the motel room, where I spent hours staring at the ceiling, replaying that day. Nate showed up unannounced one evening, banging on the motel door. "Ellie, open up," he shouted. I hesitated, then let him in. He looked haggard, his eyes bloodshot. "You need to tell me the truth," he said, pacing the small room. "Did you burn it down?" I stared at the floor, the weight of his question crushing me. "Why do you care, Nate?" I asked. "You got what you wanted." He stopped, his face twisting. "You think I wanted this? Mom and Dad are falling apart. They're staying with us now, and it's a mess. You didn't just burn the house, Ellie. You burned them." His words cut deep, but I didn't flinch. "They chose you," I said. "After everything I did, they chose you." Nate's shoulders slumped. "I didn't ask them to," he said quietly. "I didn't know." For the first time, I saw something in him. Regret, maybe even guilt. But it was too late. The fire had changed everything. "You never cared," I said, my voice breaking. "You let me carry it all. Mom, Dad, the house. And then you took it." Nate shook his head. "I didn't take anything, Ellie. They made the choice. I thought you were okay with it." "Okay with it?" I laughed, the sound sharp and hollow. "I gave up everything for that house. And you got it for free." He looked at me, his eyes searching. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "I should have helped more. I should have seen you." His apology hung in the air, fragile and incomplete. I wanted to believe him, but the hurt was too deep. After he left, I sat on the bed, my mind spinning. Nate's words stirred something, a crack in the anger I'd clung to. I thought of Mom and Dad, displaced, grieving. I thought of the house, reduced to rubble. I'd wanted to reclaim my power, but all I'd done was destroy. The realization settled like a stone in my chest. The next day, I went to see Mom and Dad at Nate's house in Seattle. The drive was long, the highway stretching endlessly before me. When I arrived, Mom opened the door, her face lighting up despite everything. "Ellie," she whispered, pulling me into a hug. Dad stood behind her, his eyes wary but soft. "We've missed you," he said. We sat in Nate's pristine living room, the silence heavy. "I'm sorry," I said finally, the words spilling out. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." Mom reached for my hand, her grip weak but warm. "We didn't know how much we hurt you," she said. "We thought we were doing the right thing." Dad nodded, his voice hoarse. "We were wrong, Ellie. We should have seen you." Their words were a balm, but they didn't erase the pain. I'd burned the house to make them see me, but at what cost? We talked for hours, unraveling years of unspoken resentment. It wasn't healing, not yet, but it was a start. As I drove back to the motel, the sky darkening, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild something from the ashes. The police called again a week later. "We need you at the station, Ellie," Martinez said, his voice clipped. My heart raced as I drove, the town blurring past. At the station, they showed me photos, charred beams, a melted gas can, my fingerprints on the handle. "Care to explain this?" Martinez asked, leaning back in his chair. I stared at the photos, my mouth dry. "I told you. The lawnmower leaked," I said, but my voice wavered. "They didn't arrest me. Not yet." But Martinez's eyes said he wasn't buying my story. "We're waiting on lab results," he said. "If they confirm arson, we'll be in touch." I nodded, my hands shaking as I left. The truth was closing in, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could dodge it. Back at the motel, I called Tom, my lawyer. "They've got your prints, Ellie," he said, his voice grim. "If you did this, you need to come clean. A confession might get you a lighter sentence." I hung up, my mind racing. A lighter sentence. Prison. The words echoed, each one heavier than the last. I'd burned the house to take back control, but now I was losing it all over again. I needed to see the ruins again, to remind myself why I'd done it. I drove to the lot, now cordoned off with yellow tape. The air still smelled of smoke, faint but sharp. I ducked under the tape and walked through the debris, my boots crunching on ash. A glint caught my eye, a photo frame, warped but intact. I picked it up, brushing away soot. It was us, me, Nate, Mom, Dad, smiling at a 4th of July barbecue years ago. I clutched it, tears burning my eyes. That night, I dreamed of the fire again, but this time, I was trapped inside, the flames closing in. I woke gasping, the room dark and stifling. I couldn't keep running from the truth. The next morning, I called Nate. "I need to talk," I said. He agreed to meet me at a park near his house, away from Mom and Dad's questions. We sat on a bench, the autumn leaves swirling around us. "I did it," I said, the words spilling out. "I burned the house." Nate's face went still, his eyes wide. "Why, Ellie?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. I told him everything. The years of sacrifice, the betrayal, the rage. He listened, his hands clasped tight, until I was done. "I didn't know it was that bad," he said finally. "I should have been there." His words were an echo of his earlier apology, but this time, they felt real. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," I said. "I just needed you to know." He nodded, his eyes distant. "What are you going to do?" he asked. I didn't have an answer. The truth was out, but the consequences were still coming. As I drove back, I thought about Mom and Dad. They deserved to know, too. I stopped by Nate's house again, my heart pounding. They were in the kitchen, sipping coffee, looking fragile but calm. "I need to tell you something," I said, my voice trembling. I told them the truth, every word raw and painful. Mom cried, her hands covering her face. Dad just stared, his jaw tight. "We failed you, Ellie," he said finally. "This is on us, too." Their guilt didn't absolve me, but it softened the edges of my pain. I'd burned the house to hurt them. But now, facing their brokenness, I saw the cost. We were all broken, all guilty, all hurting. The question was what came next, confession, prison, or something else. I didn't know yet, but for the first time, I wasn't alone in the ashes. The lab results came back 2 days later. Martinez called me to the station, his voice flat. "Gasoline, Ellie. Deliberately poured. Your prints are all over it." I sat across from him, my hands cold, my heart racing. "You want to tell me the truth now?" he asked. I swallowed, the weight of the moment crushing me. "I did it," I said, the words barely audible. "I burned the house." Martinez leaned back, his face unreadable. "Why?" he asked. I told him everything. The sacrifices, the betrayal, the will that broke me. He listened, his pen still, his eyes steady. When I finished, he sighed. "You're looking at arson charges, Ellie. Maybe more, depending on the DA. You need a lawyer." I nodded, already knowing Tom would be waiting. At Tom's office, we mapped out a plan. "Plead guilty," he said. "Show remorse. Explain the emotional toll. It might get you probation instead of prison." I agreed, though the thought of standing in court, admitting what I'd done, made my stomach churn. But there was no running now. The fire had burned away my secrets, leaving only the truth. Nate came to see me before the hearing. "I'm not testifying against you," he said, his voice firm. I told Mom and Dad to stay quiet, too. I looked at him, surprised. Why? I asked. He shrugged, his eyes tired. You're my sister. I let you down, too. We all did. His words were a lifeline, fragile but real. I nodded, unable to speak, my throat tight with gratitude. The hearing was a blur. The courtroom was small, the air thick with tension. I stood before the judge, my hands trembling, and pleaded guilty. I told my story, the years of sacrifice, the pain of being overlooked, the moment I snapped. The judge listened, her face stern but not unkind. You've caused a lot of pain, Ms. Carter, she said. But I see your remorse. I'm sentencing you to 3 years probation, community service, and restitution. Relief flooded me, mixed with shame. I'd avoided prison, but the consequences were far from over. Outside the courthouse, Mom and Dad were waiting. Mom hugged me, her tears soaking my shoulder. We're so sorry, Ellie, she whispered. Dad just gripped my hand, his eyes saying what words couldn't. Nate stood nearby, his face a mix of relief and regret. We went to Nate's house after, sitting around his dining table. It was awkward, the air heavy with unspoken words. But we talked, really talked, for the first time in years. Mom admitted they'd leaned too hard on me, assuming I could handle it. Dad confessed he'd favored Nate, thinking it was his duty as the eldest. Nate apologized again, his voice breaking as he promised to do better. It wasn't perfect. The house was gone, the pain still raw. But something shifted that day, a crack in the wall between us. I didn't know if we could rebuild what we'd lost, but we were trying. And for now, that was enough. As I drove back to the motel, the sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and red, like the fire that had changed everything. I'd burned the house to ash, but maybe, just maybe, we could build something new from the ruins. Not a house, but a family, one that saw me, one that I could forgive. Probation was a tether, but it was better than bars. I moved into a small apartment, paid for with my savings from the diner. The first few weeks were quiet, the routine of community service and check-ins with my probation officer grounding me. I worked at a local shelter, serving meals and sorting donations. It was humbling, seeing people who'd lost more than I had, yet still smiled. It made me question what I'd done, but also what I could do next. Nate started calling regularly, checking in. One weekend, he drove down with his kids, Lily and Max, their laughter filling my tiny living room. We're fixing up the guest room, he said. You're welcome anytime. I nodded, the gesture meaning more than he knew. Mom and Dad came too, bringing a potted marigold. For your new place, Mom said, her smile tentative but warm. I placed it on my windowsill, a small piece of her garden reborn. The restitution was the hardest part. The house's insurance wouldn't cover arson, so I owed Nate and my parents for the loss. I took extra shifts at the diner, every tip a step toward paying it back. It was grueling, but it felt right, like I was rebuilding something, even if it was just trust. One evening, Jess invited me to a town meeting about rebuilding the community center, damaged in a storm. I hesitated, but went. The room was full of familiar faces, neighbors who'd whispered about me, now nodding cautiously. I spoke up, suggesting a fundraiser, drawing on my years of scraping by to save the house. People listened, some even smiled. For the first time, I felt like I belonged again. Months passed, and the wounds began to heal. Nate and I worked together on a family photo album, salvaging what we could from the fire's wreckage. Mom and Dad joined us, their stories filling the gaps in our memories. We laughed, cried, argued, but we were together. The house was gone, but we were finding our way back to each other. 1 year after the fire, I stood at the lot where the house once stood. The debris was cleared now, the land flat and empty. Nate met me there, his hands in his pockets. I'm selling it, he said. We'll split the money, half for you, half for Mom and Dad's care. I stared at him, stunned. It's only fair, he added, echoing Dad's words from that fateful day. But this time, it felt different, right? I nodded, tears in my eyes. Thank you, I said. We stood in silence, the wind carrying the scent of earth and possibility. The house was gone, and so was the girl who'd burned it. In her place was someone new, flawed, scarred, but ready to rebuild. Not a house, but a life, a family, a future. As I walked away, the marigold on my windowsill came to mind. It was small, fragile, but growing. Like me. Like us. The fire had taken everything, but it had also cleared the way for something new. And for the first time in years, I believed we could make it bloom.